If you've ever looked at a Jewish grandmother and wondered how she made it to 94 with her mind sharp, her back straight, and her kitchen still running on Friday afternoons, you are not imagining things. Something is genuinely different. And after 40 years of practicing medicine and studying what actually makes people live long, healthy lives, I can tell you with confidence, it is not what you think. It is not the food. It is not the genes. Those are pieces of the picture, but the real reason, the one nobody in mainstream medicine ever talks about, goes much deeper. And my grandmother showed it to me long before I had the science to explain it. My name is Dr. Sarah Levine. I trained at Hebrew University of Jerusalem, at Hadassah Medical School, and I've spent over 4 decades combining preventive medicine with the ancestral health wisdom of my own people. I live in Boca Raton, Florida, and every single week I hear from women over 50 who tell me the same thing. I'm doing everything right. I eat well, I take my supplements, I walk, and yet I feel like I'm aging faster than my mother did. Something is missing, and they are correct. Something is missing. Not from their routine, from their understanding of how longevity actually works. Today, I'm going to share with you the real reason Jewish women have survived and thrived across 3 millennia, surviving exile, trauma, hardship, and persecution, and emerged from all of it with some of the highest rates of healthy aging in the world. This is part of a system I've spent 40 years documenting. A system of 7 laws, ancient, validated, and more urgently needed today than ever. And toward the end of this teaching, I'll share something my grandmother only revealed to the women she truly trusted, something she called the secret that holds all the other secrets together. I want to start by telling you about a Friday afternoon in Brooklyn when I was 11 years old. My grandmother Rachel is standing at her kitchen counter on Eastern Parkway. The light is coming through the window in that particular way it does in late autumn in New York, and the whole apartment smells of chicken soup and challah and something else I couldn't name then. Something that I later understood was the specific piece of Shabbat beginning to enter a home. Rachel was born in Łódź, Poland in 1921. She survived things I will not describe in detail here. She came to America with almost nothing. And yet, in that kitchen, she was the most unhurried person I have ever been in the presence of. She lived to 98 years old. She took her first medication at 90, not because she was lucky, because of what she knew. She kept notebooks. They were written partly in Yiddish, partly in Polish, with occasional Hebrew words in the margins. When I was in medical school, those notebooks seemed charming to me, the remedies of a woman from another century. By the time I was 45, they saved my life. I had developed chronic fatigue, hormonal disruption, cognitive fog so thick some mornings I couldn't form a complete sentence. My lab work was normal. My colleagues had no answers. In desperation, I opened Rachel's notebooks, and what I found wasn't folk medicine, it was a system, a complete, internally consistent system for maintaining vitality across a lifetime. It took me 20 more years to understand the science behind every entry in those notebooks. But the night I began applying what she wrote, I felt something shift, not metaphorically, physically. Within 3 weeks, I was sleeping through the night for the first time in 4 years. Within 90 days, I felt like a different woman. Before I go further, I want you to do something. In the comments right now, I want you to type, "I am built to last." Just those 4 words. Because the first step in understanding what I'm about to teach you is accepting that what you're experiencing, the fatigue, the fog, the feeling that your body is working against you, is not the inevitable cost of aging. It is the cost of operating outside a system your body was designed for. Type it. I am built to last. Now, let's talk about what's actually happening to women over 50 in this country. According to the CDC's most recent data on women's health, nearly 60% of women between 55 and 64 are managing at least one chronic condition. And a significant portion of them report that despite medical treatment, their quality of life continues to decline. That is not a success story. That is a system failing the people it's supposed to serve. The National Institute on Aging has noted that while average life expectancy has increased, the number of years people live in good health, what researchers call health span, as distinct from lifespan, has not kept pace. We are living longer, but not necessarily living better, and women, particularly women in the second half of life, are bearing the weight of that gap. The conventional medical system gives women over 53 answers to almost every complaint: hormone therapy, antidepressants, or the suggestion to lose weight and exercise more. I am not dismissing any of those tools, but they are tools, not a system. And when you apply tools without a system, you get temporary results at best. The women I see in my practice who have tried everything, the supplements, the diets, the hormone panels, the sleep hygiene protocols, and still feel lost, are not doing something wrong. They are missing the framework. They are applying pieces of an answer without understanding the whole design. Here is what the sacred texts understood thousands of years before we had the research to confirm it. In Deuteronomy and Leviticus, in the writings of Maimonides, who was not only a rabbi, but the most advanced physician of the 12th century, a man who wrote detailed protocols for healthy aging for Sultan Saladin himself, there is a consistent thread. The body is not a machine to be maintained. It is a living system embedded in a larger living system. And it functions or fails depending on whether those systems are in alignment. Maimonides wrote in his Regimen of Health in 1198 that the emotional state of a person has more power over their physical health than any remedy a physician can provide. 800 years before psychoneuroimmunology existed as a field, this man was writing about the mind-body community connection as the foundation of longevity. That is not coincidence. That is accumulated wisdom operating at a level our modern reductionist medicine is only beginning to rediscover. What I discovered through Rachel's notebooks, through 40 years of clinical practice, through the research that I have read and in some cases been part of, is that Jewish longevity is not an accident, and it is not primarily genetic. It is systemic. It is the result of a coherent set of practices carried across generations, each one reinforcing the others, each one targeting a different mechanism of aging. I've organized these practices into what I call the 7 Jewish laws of longevity. 7, because in our tradition, 7 is the number of completeness, 7 days of creation. The 7th day as the sacred pause that renews everything, the structure of the universe encoded in a number. Today, I am sharing with you the 2 laws that I believe are most responsible for the phenomenon you're observing when you see a Jewish great-grandmother dancing at a wedding at 91. These are the laws that mainstream medicine most consistently ignores. And once you understand them, you will never look at aging the same way. The first law I want to teach you today is what I call the law of Shevra. Shevra is a Hebrew word that means roughly a fellowship, a circle of people bound not just by affection, but by mutual obligation. In traditional Jewish life, you do not get to be alone when you are struggling. The community shows up, not with casseroles and a card, with presence, with structure, with repeated, consistent, dependable presence. My grandmother Rachel, when she arrived in Brooklyn with nothing, was absorbed into a chevra within days. People she had never met before became responsible for her, and she became responsible for them. That web of obligation, of being needed, and of having others who would not let you disappear is, I now understand, one of the most powerful anti-aging forces that exists. Here is what the science says. Research published by Brigham Young University, a landmark meta-analysis led by Dr. Julianne Holt-Lundstad, found that social isolation increases the risk of premature death by 26%, roughly equivalent to smoking 15 cigarettes a day. A follow-up analysis covering 3.4 million people confirmed that loneliness and weak social connections are as dangerous to longevity as obesity. The Harvard Study of Adult Development, the longest-running study on happiness and health in history, now spanning over 80 years, concluded that the single most consistent predictor of healthy aging is not diet, not exercise, not genetics. It is the quality of a person's relationships, their sense of being known, their sense of mattering to other people. My grandmother knew this, not as a study, as a practice. In Pirkei Avot, the Ethics of the Fathers, one of the most beautiful texts in Jewish wisdom, it is written, "Do not separate yourself from the community." That is not a social suggestion. In our tradition, it is a commandment. The Talmud in Tractate Tanit teaches that the divine presence does not rest on a person who is isolated. Community is not the backdrop to a healthy life in the Jewish framework. It is a pillar of it. And when I look at the Jewish communities I've worked with, in Miami, in New York, in Israel, I see Chevra operating as a biological force. I see older women embedded in networks of regular, physical, face-to-face contact. Shabbat dinners every week, year after year. Holiday gatherings that are not optional. The built-in structure of a tradition that will not allow you to simply disappear into your house and stay there. Contrast that with what I see in my practice. Women over 60 who moved after retirement, whose children live in different states, who go days without meaningful conversation, who have Instagram but not a single person who would notice if they didn't call. The loneliness epidemic in this country is real. The American Surgeon General declared it a public health crisis in 2023. And I will tell you from 40 years of clinical observation, loneliness accelerates aging at a cellular level. It elevates cortisol. It suppresses immune function. It disrupts sleep architecture. It shortens telomeres, the protective caps on your chromosomes that are one of our best biological markers of aging. Isolation does not just make you sad. It makes you old, and it makes you sick. The practical application of this law is not complicated, but it requires intention. Chevra is not about having friends. It is about belonging to a structure that expects you and holds you accountable. If you attend a religious community, any faith tradition, begin showing up with the same regularity that my grandmother showed up to synagogue. Not when you feel like it. Consistently. If you do not have a faith community, find a structured group that meets in person on a recurring schedule. A study group, a walking group, a cooking circle, a volunteer organization. The structure matters as much as the warmth. And here is the piece that most people miss. Reciprocal obligation matters more than either one. You must not just receive care, you must give it. Being needed is one of the most powerful longevity medicines that exists. Rachel knew this. She was still baking for her neighbors at 94. Not because she had to, because she understood at a cellular level that she wouldn't have put in those terms, that being useful to other people keeps you alive. The second law I want to open for you today, and I say open, not complete, because this law has layers that take time to fully teach, is what I call the law of Simcha. Simcha is the Hebrew word for joy, but it does not mean happiness. In our tradition, happiness is a feeling that comes and goes depending on circumstances. Simcha is a practice, it is a discipline, it is something you do regardless of how you feel. Proverbs 17:22, one of the oldest medical texts in human history, states it plainly. A cheerful heart is good medicine, but a crushed spirit dries up the bones. That is not poetry. That is a clinical observation written 3,000 years ago. And modern psychoneuroimmunology has confirmed it with a precision that Maimonides would have found deeply satisfying. Research out of University College London has shown that people who report higher levels of positive affect, what we might casually call joyfulness, have measurably lower levels of inflammatory markers, including interleukin 6 and C-reactive protein. Chronic inflammation is one of the central mechanisms of accelerated aging. It drives cardiovascular disease, cognitive decline, metabolic disruption, and immune dysfunction. Joy, practiced habitual intentional joy, is an anti-inflammatory agent. Oh, not metaphorically, biochemically. The mechanism involves the vagus nerve, the regulation of the HPA axis, and the effect of positive emotional states on cortisol and DHEA ratios. Rachel did not know those terms, but she practiced Simcha with the rigor of someone who understood exactly what it was doing. Every Friday night, regardless of what that week had held, she would light the Shabbat candles and she would sing. Not because she felt like singing. Sometimes she was tired. Sometimes she was grieving. Sometimes she was worried. She sang because in our tradition, joy is an obligation on Shabbat. It is commanded, and the genius of that commandment, which I only understood as a physician years later, is that the practice of joyful behavior changes the neurobiology of the person performing it. You do not feel joy and then smile. You smile, you sing, you act with celebration, and your brain interprets those signals as safety, as abundance, as life. And your body chemistry shifts accordingly. This is what behavioral scientists now call behavioral activation, what my grandmother called simcha. But there is a second dimension to this law that I am not going to fully teach today, because the way Rachel practiced simcha was inseparable from the sixth law, from Chevra. Joy practiced alone is far less powerful than joy practiced in community. And the way these two laws interlock is something I will come back to in a coming teaching, because explaining it properly requires more time than we have left today. What I want you to hold for now is this. The question is not whether you feel joyful. The question is whether you have a structure in your life that commands joy from you on a regular basis, that expects it, that practices it collectively, that makes it non-negotiable. I want to be honest with you about something. There have been periods in my life when I let both of these laws slip. After my divorce in my early 50s, I withdrew. I stopped going to services. I canceled dinners. I worked. And I watched myself age during those 3 years in a way that frightened me. My inflammation markers went up. My sleep collapsed. I gained weight without changing my diet. I aged, not because I was eating differently, because I had removed myself from the system that was keeping me well. When I returned to it, consciously, deliberately, the reversal was not immediate, but it was real. It took about a year, and that year taught me more about these laws than any study I have ever read. We are living in a moment when isolation has become normalized. The pandemic accelerated a trend that was already underway. We work from home, we order food to our door, we consume entertainment alone on screens. And our bodies, which evolved over hundreds of thousands of years to live embedded in tight, interdependent social structures, are paying a price for that disconnection that we haven't fully begun to measure. The practices my grandmother carried, that have been carried by Jewish communities across centuries of dispersion and difficulty, were not luxury practices. They were survival technology, and they are more urgently necessary right now than at almost any point I can remember in my lifetime. My grandmother used to say that these practices don't work the way pills work, one at a time on demand. They work the way a garden works. All 7 laws together, tended with consistency season after season. You cannot take the community practice out of the system and expect the same result. You cannot have the joy without the structure that holds the joy. You cannot have the longevity without the whole design. I've seen this in 40 years of practice. The women who transform, who are sharper and stronger at 70 than they were at 60, are never the women who applied one tip. They are the women who rebuilt their lives around a complete framework. What I want you to take from today is this. The real reason Jewish women live past 90 is not a single secret. It is a system. And within that system, the 2 most consistently overlooked laws are the ones I have taught you today. Shevra, the obligation to belong, to be needed, to be embedded in a structure of mutual care. And Simcha, the discipline of joy, practice not when you feel like it, but as a regular, structured, non-negotiable part of your week. These are not soft skills. They are hard biology, and they are available to you regardless of your background, your faith, or where you are starting from. In our tradition, the body is not yours to neglect. It is a gift given to you in trust. Tzelem Elohim, made in the image of the divine. To care for it is a sacred act. And caring for it means understanding that it was never designed to function in isolation and never designed to function without joy. Both of those truths are available to you, beginning today. In my next teaching, I'll share another of the 7 Jewish laws of longevity, one that most women over 50 have been doing exactly backwards without realizing it. It involves something you do every single night before you sleep. And when I explain what Rachel's notebook said about it alongside what researchers at the University of California have confirmed in the last decade, I think it will change the way you approach the hours between sundown and sunrise permanently. If this teaching reached something in you, I want to ask 2 things. Subscribe to this channel and turn on your notifications so that you never miss a teaching. And share this video with one woman in your life who you know is struggling, who is doing everything right and still feels like something is missing. She needs this more than she knows, and leave me a comment. Tell me, which of the 2 laws I taught today do you feel you've been missing more? Shevra or Simcha? I read every comment. I want to know where you are. Until next time. Lakam, to life.